Very much indeed. I will now give the floor to Mr. Gustavo Gallón, Director of the Colombian Commission of Jurists.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Vice President. I would like to address my warm greetings to you, to the members and observers of the Human Rights Council, and to those who have joined me in this high-level panel here on the podium. We cannot deny that there has been substantial normative and institutional progress that was achieved 20 years ago in Vienna, and that has continued to be built upon since then over the last 2 decades. It is also undeniable that there is a need to continue fine-tuning the universal system of prevention and protection of human rights. At the time of Vienna, when we gathered in the Austrian capital, there were still those who cast doubt on the universal nature of human rights, or indeed others who advocated for the primacy of civil and political rights over economic, social and cultural rights. There are those who believed these latter rights, economic, social and cultural rights, to be mere aspirations and not rights per se. All of these matters and others that pre-Vienna gave rise to heated debates are today, we hope, a thing of the past. In an unequivocal way, the Vienna Declaration stated that the universal character of human rights and freedoms cannot be cast doubt upon, without prejudice to the need to take into account the unique national and regional needs, because, and this is again according to Vienna, states have the duty, whatever their political, economic and cultural systems, to promote and protect all human rights and fundamental freedoms. End of quote from the VDPA. All human rights, civil and political as well as economic, social and cultural, and today we could also include among that number environmental, were declared to be, and I quote, indivisible and interdependent and interrelated, end of quote. The right to development was recognized as a universal and inalienable right, once again I'm quoting, and forming an integral part of fundamental human rights, end of quote. And it was correctly warned that a lack of development could not be invoked as a justification for curtailing human rights that have been internationally recognized. The Vienna Declaration and Programme of Action also made it clear, and here I quote once again, that states must eradicate all violations of human rights and their root causes, as well as any obstacles which hamper the realization and enjoyment of these rights. End of quote. In making this distinction between violations on the one hand and obstacles on the other, a differentiation was made between those acts which are imputable to the state and those which can be imputed to private individuals, such as those that are termed by the Vienna Declaration as terrorist acts, methods and practice, which were qualified as being activities aimed at the destruction of human rights, fundamental freedoms and democracy. With regard to those segments of the population in particular situations of vulnerability, the conference had a lot to say and paved the way for the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the International Decade for Indigenous Peoples, the approval and adoption of the Declaration on Violence Against Women, the universal ratification of the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, its optional protocol, and the establishment of the Office of the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women. It also was an engine for the universal ratification of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and drafted uniform standards on equal opportunities for persons with disabilities, the action programme for the 3rd decade of action against racism and racial discrimination, and the establishment of the Office of Special Rapporteur on contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia and related forms of intolerance, amongst other achievements of the conference in Vienna. With regard to armed conflicts, the conference called on the international community to adopt a global and coordinated approach, bringing together interested countries and relevant bodies, always bearing in mind the mandate of the UNHCR, to address the root causes that led people to become refugees and gave rise to forced displacement of peoples, so that they could find sustainable solutions and improve the mechanism and assistance led to these people in emergency situations, and made an appeal to the states, in particular those states that have not yet done so, to adhere to the Geneva Conventions of 1949 and their protocols, and to take all necessary measures at the domestic level to ensure their full domestication and application. The conference also signalled that we must strengthen and make more efficient and transparent the advisory services and technical cooperation services provided by the now defunct Human Rights Centre as a way of contributing to greater respect for human rights. And in order to achieve this, it called for periodic assessments of the various programs and projects, and in particular stated that there should be at least once a year open-ended information sessions to which all member states and relevant organizations were invited to oversee the assessment of these projects and programs. To put all of this into practice and to ensure that it would indeed be done, the conference backed the creation of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, which was, without any shadow of a doubt, the most important institutional innovation coming out of Vienna. Just as people marvel today at how we were able to work in the pre-computer era, it also might perhaps cause us to scratch our heads today when we think about how the human rights architecture of the United Nations worked without the Office of the High Commissioner before this was established. These and other achievements would not have been possible without the firm and unwavering participation of civil society, which organized preparatory conferences, as Ms. Jelani has said, in all the different continents, and which was present in Vienna with 4,000 representatives acting on behalf of 1,400 non-governmental organizations. These are not official figures, but these are the numbers that we counted, 4,000 representatives of 1,400 organizations. 5 years later, an even larger number of activists supported in Rome the adoption of the Statute of the International Criminal Court, a task that Vienna was unfortunately unable to deliver on, but which it did endorse, as well did various others. This normative and institutional progress is not enough, and this perhaps goes without saying, to guarantee an acceptable level of prevention of violation of human rights, as well as protection and promotion of human rights, and reparation for violations of these same rights. There are at least 5 areas in which, as a matter of urgency, we need to make progress in fixing and amending the universal human rights system. Firstly, we need effective action mechanisms at the international community level when we are faced with serious human rights crises. Vienna could not prevent the massacres in the former Yugoslavia, which were taking place simultaneously with the conference just a few kilometers from where we were meeting. The former Commission and now the Human Rights Council have been undaunted and vocal witnesses of the wars of aggression in Afghanistan and Iraq and the persistent violation of human dignity in Guantanamo, which was criticized by the very President of the United States. However, nothing effective could be done, and who knows if it was even tried, to seriously protect the victims of Mubarak in Egypt or of Ben Ali in Tunisia. The same is true. We see no effective action with regard to what's happening in Syria currently. Although people are, of course, doing things, we don't know if it's enough and if it's coordinated enough, nor do we know if anything was really done in a serious vein in Equatorial Guinea, the world's longest-standing dictatorship, nor in Colombia, where over the last decade members of the armed forces have murdered thousands of civilians and then tried to pass them off as dead combatants. And in December just gone, they approved constitutional reform to increase the legal authority of the armed forces, which could lead to increased impunity for these and other crimes, despite appeals by all international bodies responsible for monitoring human rights not to do so. We have to create an effective action mechanism at the international community level to prevent such forms of abuse to be continuously and cynically perpetrated. The second point I'd like to draw your attention to is that there's a need to substantially beef up the protection of economic, social, cultural and environmental rights. It is inconceivable that there still be resistance to the right to seek via judicial channels at the international level the enjoyment of rights such as health, housing or work. The right to adequate food is the bedrock of the right to life. The two need to go hand in hand. You cannot have one without the other. An increasing number of fish are contaminated with mercury, and we blithely continue to poison crops with agrochemicals. The Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food has suggested here, in this very setting in the Council, that we need to reorientate our agricultural system towards large-scale production methods and sustainable methods which will contribute effectively on an ongoing basis to delivering on the human right to adequate food. This should not be an intermittent concern. It should be an ongoing and central source of concern and action by the entire human rights system. Thirdly, I think it's obvious to us all that we need to increase the human rights budget within the United Nations. The Vienna conference made such an appeal, but this has not yet been done. Fourthly, I believe the time has now come to set up an international human rights court or tribunal, which would allow us to overcome the deficiencies in national protection systems and give conviction and enforceability to decisions adopted by the treaty bodies who have the competence to admit individual cases. And the fifth change that I think needs to be made as a matter of urgency is that we need to overcome the conflict between security concerns and human rights. Security policies which are not based on human rights as an end and means, the security policies are designed to deliver human rights, will only lead to greater insecurity and uncertainty. There may, of course, be other issues that need to be brought up, but I believe that these 5 issues are so significant that they do merit a third Global Human Rights Conference, which I think it would be good to begin organizing now, today, that perhaps it could be held in 5 years' time as we commemorate the quarter century of Vienna, building on the legacy of Vienna, and indeed the legacy of the first such conference held in Tehran 45 years ago. Thank you very much.